Hi everybody, this is Craig Tanner for The Mindful Eye and the Daily Critique. Today's image was created by Norman, who is a beginning photographer from California. Norman says he took this image at the Santa Monica Pier and was using the sun at the end of the day to cast a beautiful color on the pier and the buildings. Norman says he recently purchased an 8-stop neutral density filter and was using it for the first time to slow down the exposure in the water here. Metadata: it's a Nikon D700 24 to 70 zoom lens at 24 millimeters. That is the effective focal length. This is a full frame sensor camera, so this is a super wide angle shot. Rest of the metadata we have is f11 and 3 seconds. Let's just go ahead right away and talk about the use of the neutral density here in 3 seconds to slow the exposure down. Whenever we're shooting moving water, if we freeze the water, stop motion on the water, water can have so much contrast that it can overwhelm almost everything else. And in an image like this, where Norman is choosing to play around with a subject in a very dramatic way, this section of the beach where people have walked and there's a lot of texture and the side light is accentuating that. If Norman wants to use this and leverage it, let's say against the pier, it's going to be a lot harder to do that if we shoot at a faster shutter speed and the water is sort of competing for our attention when it comes to texture. So I think slowing the shutter down here has really helped to make this a much more important part of the image if we're pushing for unity, the texture in here. And one of the things that I really encourage photographers to include in their kit if they shoot landscapes for sure is in addition to a polarizer and possibly a couple of split neutral density filters, also neutral density. And I really think somewhere around 8 to 10 stops is a minimum if you're really into shooting landscapes. You can imagine if 8 stops at f11 is only getting us to 3 seconds, that if it was much brighter light and we were wanting to slow our shutter down at all without stopping all the way down and getting a lot of diffraction, that having a little bit more than 8 stops might be important. So really great use of the ND filter here to simplify this composition. Another thing that I wanted to mention today is color here. Really beautiful quality of light. I love how Norman is playing this russet colored light at the end of the day off of the blue sky and the blue-green in the water. But one thing that's really interesting about this shot to me is that right away the color was exquisitely beautiful and beyond just the ordinary sort of blue and orange that we typically get if we shoot early and late and play the warm sun off of the reflected blue of the rest of the sky on a clear, partly cloudy day. Let's go into Kuler and look at what's happening here. Instead of having blue and orange, colors that may be a little bit more ordinary, we can use Kuler, which is a fantastic tool inside of Photoshop CS4. To get there, you just go to Window, Extensions, Kuler. And if you do, you'll open up a panel. You can click on Create up here, and it will lead you to this awesome Hue, Saturation, Value color wheel. We've got our hues, typical way we think about color wheel, moving around in a circle. On the outside of the color wheel, we have the saturation of the color that we can change by moving the color either closer to the middle of this color wheel, push it all the way, desaturate it to gray, or out to the edge where it's the most saturated. We can also change the value of a color by clicking on this slider. This tool inside of Photoshop, which I've recorded a video on and I've talked about quite a bit, is an amazing tool for us to learn about color and manage color. And one of the things that we can see, if we come in and use the eyedropper tool to click on an average area of the blue out here and then add that as a base color to Kuler, if we go to complementary color as the color rule, and then we take this color and we saturate it much like it is in Norman's image, then we can see that Norman definitely has a complementary color pair here, this sort of blue-green and this color right here, and you're seeing that here and here in the image. But the interesting thing is, if we talk about the hue of the color, it's an in-between color. here's your blues, here's your greens, here's your primary reds, here's your orange. But if we look at where these colors are existing on the color wheel, they're in between. It's a mix of blue and green. It's a mix of a red and orange. So we're taking a secondary and a primary and we're mixing those colors to get tertiary colors, and these more in between colors tend to have more of an extraordinary psychological impact on the viewer. Primaries and secondaries can make us think about more ordinary color or ordinary experience. Tertiary color can make us think more about a painting, something that's maybe more abstract, something that's psychologically different or extraordinary. And you have a choice when you're working on your images to push for these kinds of colors. One other thing that I wanted to say about color today is the way that you manage color overall, if you shoot color in your work, is an awesome way to push towards style. And if you go back and you look at the icons of photography, if you look at people like Ernst Haas, one of sort of forefathers of color work, or let's say a photographer like Annie Leibovitz, we could say a lot of names right now, but in addition to a lot of other things, you'll see that colors are worked with over time in a way that suggests style, that ties the work together. And it's something I'd really encourage you to think about as you try to grow your work and push it forward. Let's get out of Kuler. A couple of other points that I wanted to make today, in addition to really enjoying the tertiary colors here, beautiful quality of light. I really like the way that Norman has worked with quality of line and implying shapes to create sort of this real graphic image, where this area is a shape, then the smooth sand is a shape, the water is a shape, and so on and so forth. When it comes to variation for this image, there are a couple of things that I want to talk about. It really has to do with crop, either in camera or after the fact. One of the things that I sort of constantly harp on when I teach workshops is that it can be so tempting to get the top of the room or the top of the scene to fully describe what is going on to the viewer. But when we do that, we risk a couple of things. We risk having so much information that the person that's looking looks and says, okay, I've seen that, I've seen the pier before at the end of the day, and then they look away. We also risk having way too many subjects or way too much contrast for the eye to deal with. When we go up and we get the top of the room here, so if we go all the way up to the top of the pier, we have all these ideas that finish, and they're finishing against one of the brightest parts of the scene. The top of the scene, the top of the room, usually is where at least part of the light is coming from. And so that means as those ideas finish and they create negative space shapes, there tends to be a lot of contrast in that area of the image. And this is an image where I'd love to play around with a variation where we make it less literal. I'm going to escape out of that because I didn't fully grab the image to crop. There we go. And I'm going to crop down from the top, take away the top of the pier, and just come down to the point where we have the pilings. And now I have an image that to me is simpler. I have an image that's more about quality of line or just geometric shapes. The sky that's there now is a very long, narrow geometric shape that can potentially, in sort of a fun way, in a dynamic way, play off of this strip, the sort of a long rectangle. Here it is again, but it's much smaller. Now this idea can play off of the texture and the idea of triangle. Here we actually have a very long, dramatic, obtuse triangle. It can also play off of the wedge of the water in a way that is possibly a little bit more unified in the image. I think if you wanted to make this image more abstract, that you could keep coming down even further. You could lose the walkway on the pier, you could just show the supports to the pier, you could really push this right out to the edge. You could also start to see other crops in here, square crops or crops that aren't as panoramic. Where this image started out is stunning. If we want to talk about a descriptive image, really stunning quality of light, really beautiful tertiary color here that's extraordinary relative to the normal blue and orange that we could get, and a really great job of using the neutral density to simplify this and make it more about the idea of inherent quality of line and shape. I want to say a big thank you to Norman for sharing this image with us. Hope to see you again real soon on the Daily Critique.